Mira Business FM.
Mira Business FM, my name's Tim Elliott, hour 4 of the morning drive, and it's all about artificial intelligence now. Nasser Bostan is an AI startup founder and CEO. He's an international cybersecurity expert. He's also a keynote speaker, and I would say, Nasser, you are a thinker as well.
I like to think, that's for sure, yes.
Yeah, and I mean that as that's not even a backhanded compliment. You're a man that likes to ponder our existence and where we are and question things. Nice to see you.
Good to see you too, mate.
Good to have you here. It's kind of hard to sum you up, if I'm honest. I kind of wrote that, and you're nodding as I'm saying it, but there's a lot more to you. It's like that networking question of, what do you do, or who are you with, and those awkward situations. So I thought, let's start with just fill us in on who you are and what you've done, the cybersecurity, the AI, and where you are now. And I guess, I suppose, a little bit of the thinking as well.
Yeah, sure. Nasser Bostan. I'm originally from the UK, although I'm based here in Dubai now. Background in cybersecurity, as you mentioned. So spent a lot of time at a big telco firm, British Telecom, for those who are familiar with the name. Ran the cybersecurity business for quite a number of years across most of the globe, actually. From there, I was fortunate enough to pick up a role at NEOM, the city in the desert of Saudi Arabia, which is, designed to be the world's most sort of futuristic city, powered by AI, this kind of thing. So it was a real interesting challenge for me, because basically that allowed me to build a vision for the next generation of artificially intelligence-powered cybersecurity for the world's first AI-powered city. Incredibly interesting. And it was really from there that I decided that I wanted to really push ahead with AI and cyber as well. And so I founded my own company, Simulacra X, and what we're doing here is really looking at the future of AI. And I know that sounds weird, because AI is kind of already here, and it's a relatively new thing. But when we look at the future of what AI needs to be, when we talk about AGI and things like that, then we already need to start thinking about that now. So that's kind of where
AGI, just outline that. What does that mean? Artificial
General Intelligence. So AI today is what we call narrow AI, i.e. it's good at certain things. For example, text and images and videos and things like that. But it's not a general intelligence. And when we mean a general intelligence, we mean that it's equivalent to a human and on anything a human being can do when it comes to cognitive functions, as it were. So that's artificial general intelligence. And then, of course, there's artificial superintelligence, which is a sort of future where AI will be smarter than humans at basically everything, and really be able to start pushing frontiers that we would never even be able to contemplate.
Okay, so how far past machine learning? Because that was really the first iteration, I suppose, of AI, wasn't it? The machines can kind of anticipate needs and then offer alternatives to things you're doing. The really early stages of AI, how far past that are we now, would you say?
So I'd say, we're at the deep learning stage now. So what is deep learning? Deep learning is effectively the way that the AI is architected, in that it has a number of layers within its neural network, what's called a neural network, that allows it to reason in a way that in the previous world of machine learning it wasn't able to do. So when you see ChatGPT being able to produce all of these incredibly sort of realistic and lifelike outputs from whatever you ask it, that's as a result of this sort of deep learning architecture that's now sort of prevalent out there.
Okay, I mean, it is everywhere now, isn't it? And I finally realized just how much it's a part of our lives. I was never really a big ChatGPT user. I've got 2 kids at university, and I'm very kind of, don't just ChatGPT your dissertation. I'm very hot on that. And I think universities are wise to that, obviously. But as a parent, you want your kids to be thinking and to be thinking critically. And I think AI takes a little bit of that out if you want it to, if you're studying. But I realized when Google introduced AI to, if you ask Google a question, it used to come up with vague answers, websites, etc. But now it comes up with a little paragraph and you can ask for a deeper dive.
Yeah.
It really is everywhere.
It is, and actually you touched upon a really key point, and that is human cognition and what human cognition will look like, 10 years, 20 years from now, in a world where AI is becoming smarter and smarter and smarter. And in fact, there's already statistics that show that, school-age children and college-age young adults are already showing I'd say a cognitive decline in terms of their ability to theorize and rationalize and be able to give outcomes that the likes of you and I, older people, were having to do because we didn't have a chat GPT to be able to do that for us.
I'm going to let you away with that, you and I, older people, just once.
Yes.
But you're right. Yeah. And it bothers me that, well, maybe bothers me is the wrong word. Maybe I'm just very old school in that, I'm used to having to research and to form opinions or form, questions that lead to opinions on the basis of that research. And maybe that's just an old way of doing it. Maybe we need to get past that.
Yeah, well, if you look at people, as I said, like us, ourselves, and a number of people I've got around me, we use ChatGPT as almost like a validation tool, right? In that because we are a subject matter expert, we have the experience, we have the ability to rationalize, think, and theorize and research, that our generation kind of uses it for that kind of purpose. Whereas what we're seeing now is that increasingly people are using it for the base research and sort of base cognition of the subject that they're trying to research, as it were. So I see that as a bit of a worrying trend. And actually what that also indicates is that we need to look at the future of education. And actually you mentioned the Futuristic X Summit, and that was one of the topics that was discussed during a panel discussion, is what does the future of education look like, and how do we sort of put a new curriculum together that basically looks at how we fuse AI and humans together into some kind of new way of thinking.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because I had time I was talking to a lot of people and didn't get to a lot of the sessions, but I had time for a few, and in each one of them it was very much questioning the future of education. And that's not to say, pointing at teachers or pointing in particular at the system. It's just there is a need for an evolution to allow us to move forward.
There was a really good quote from Mohammed Al-Khatib. He's actually the organizer of the event, and he was in on the panel discussion, and I really liked what he said. He said, today, education is just in case education, i.e. you learn algebra and you learn all of these other sort of frameworks, just in case you might need them at some point in the future. And I don't know about you, but I can't remember the last time I used algebra in my daily life, right? And so we're going to move away from just in case to just in time education, and that is that where you are as in your learning journey and where you want to go in your learning journey will dictate the specific education track that you follow, i.e. it'll now be just in time because that's what you need at that moment in time from an education perspective. And I really, really like the way he said that.
That's interesting, and it's also the point, isn't it, that we're teaching kids for jobs that don't exist. That's been the case for a while. But it was always thought, jobs that won't exist will maybe exist in 10 years. But it's really now jobs that are going to exist in 3 to 5 years. Everything is speeding up because, obviously, technology is speeding up.
Yeah, and this is also another really interesting topic, because if you look at the event, and a lot of the futurists, there's something like 30 out of the top 50 futurists in the world were at the event, and a lot of them were asked about where do you see AI and where do you see the world of AI 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years from now. And a number of them were saying that, by 2030, the world will be fundamentally different than it is today in terms of, as you said, jobs and how AI is going to replace a lot of what humans are doing today. I'm not convinced that it's going to be quite as revolutionary in such a short time scale as some of them believe it is going to be. But yes, there will absolutely be impact on a number of areas, primarily those areas where it's more about, I'd say, a knowledge-based economy than a physical-based economy. So I don't see that there's going to be a huge amount of impact in the short term on roles like construction workers and people like that. But certainly when you look at things like teaching, when you look at things like anything else that's sort of in that kind of knowledge economy kind of thing, I think there's going to be impacts there for sure.
I mean, it's changed hugely since you and I were at school. We're a similar age, and there is almost no comparison at all between jobs now and jobs then, and also there's a mind shift in terms of you can do other things now. You don't have to be an engineer, a teacher, or whatever for life. You could head off and do your own thing. There is a fundamental change, and it's interesting. I heard that from a number of people yesterday. 2030 is kind of the point. You're going to look back at 2025 in 2030 and think, oh, the old days, just as we do, I guess, at our school days. So, look, we were both at the event. It'd be interesting to run through a little bit more about the summit. It had lots of interesting guests. It opened with Professor Brian Cox, the astrophysicist. He was online from London. There were lots, as you've said, futurists there, people who really do think about the future, I guess, in a different way. I don't know how to define futurist, really. I'll ask you to do that in a second. But scientists, innovators, astronauts, Scott Kelly, the guy who was 340 days in the International Space Station. And what I thought was really interesting was almost to a man or woman, these were people telling stories, and they were talking very much in kind of story terms about the challenge of aligning the pace of technology, exponential pace of technology, with the slower adaptation of policy and governance and human uptake as well. And that's still a mismatch, isn't it?
A huge mismatch. And here's the thing, you see. I mean, there's a lot of discussions around, okay, how are we going to make sure that we have the right regulations and policies around the development and usage of AI? Because fundamentally, as you said, it's going to change everything that we do sooner or later. And the question is, well, how do you do that on a global basis? And my view on that is you can't, because the world as you see it today is fractured. It's geopolitical divides, this kind of thing, and I think one of the we might look back into the future and say it was a mistake. But open sourcing and allowing AIs to be downloaded by anybody might be the worst thing that we did, actually, because when we had the likes of the OpenAIs and the Anthropics who had their closed source models proprietary, you could use it through the web interface, but you couldn't download it and turn it into whatever you wanted to do. But of course, there was a proliferation of open source models, which means that anybody, whoever they are, whatever their intention is, now has the ability to have this on their desktop and do with it as they please. And I think we'll look back at some point and think, maybe that wasn't a good idea. The point is, going back to your original question around regulation, well, how do you regulate that? Yeah. How do you regulate some dude in his bedroom with an open source model and doing with it as he pleases or she pleases?
I mean, I have no answer to that, and it's something that concerns me as well. But I guess the answer to, how do you regulate is, you have to start. You have to try. You've got to start somewhere. There was an announcement at the end of the day yesterday in conjunction with the World Economic Forum of a new regulatory framework which is being put into place. The details as yet I don't have, but I know that this is something that's being thought through. The legal aspects of how you do that are being considered. But where do you start with that?
They did, and if you look at California, that was they were quite the pioneers just a couple of years ago in introducing regulation, given that a lot of the big AI companies are out of San Francisco. Look what happened there, right? There was a massive pushback. There was a change in the regime. We had a new president. He has pushed back on that regulation, and California's had to sort of roll back on it because there was this concern that it was going to stymie development and innovation. So you've got this issue where you have, rightly so, as you said, the need to build regulations around this, but then you've got private interests that perhaps are not aligned to that. And if you look at the Europeans had the AI Act, and it's a really, really good comprehensive act as well. But then look at the amount of investment and development work that's going on in Europe, and the amount of companies that are willing to headquarter out of Europe for fear of being held back by the regulations than you see in the US. So there's going to be this big balancing act between the absolute need to regulate this thing and the need to be able to innovate and move forward quickly.
I mean, I guess that's a familiar story, isn't it? That's how the business of technology works. But there's an inherent, I guess, trust issue. And it strikes me that the core of artificial intelligence, the real key to it is being able to trust the information.
Yeah.
And regulation around that is obviously incredibly important. Yeah. I don't know how you square that circle or whatever the phrase is.
Well, the current technology that we're using, these transformer-based neural networks that underpin the likes of every AI LLM that you can see today, are inherently what we call probabilistic, i.e., you cannot determine that the answer that they provide to you is going to be correct. In fact, you could ask the same question 5 times and you'll get 5 different answers, a lot of the time. And that's because of the sheer complexity and size of these neural networks. I mean, without going into too much technicalities, you've heard of parameters, right? Like there's a 1 billion parameter model and a 1.5 billion parameter model. These parameters are basically all of the words, images, videos, and parts of that model has been trained on, and the amount of weights and biases that each of those separate, say, words, for example, have been given an importance and a relationship to other words. And so the problem with it is that as you build more and more training data, and therefore more and more ability into the system, and more of these parameters to make it smarter, it's basically getting more and more difficult to actually understand how it's deriving its answers, because there's just too much parameters to be able to map.
Right. I mean, it reminds me of old school scales, where you're continually putting weights on either side to try and balance it. I mean, there is an inherent imbalance, isn't there, in all these sets of data?
Yeah, and that's exactly it. So you've got the problem of training data in itself, right, where I say something like 55%, I saw this statistic at the event, 55% of all of internet data is in English, and most of that has been derived from, say, the Western world in terms of content. So there's a lot of inherent biases within the training data that most of these LLMs are based on anyway. So you've got that as an issue. And then the second issue, as I said, is that each individual company is responsible for setting the weights and biases that the LLM uses to access that data and to derive its answers. And I always give the example of a really good experiment that Anthropic did with their Claude chatbot, where they asked it a question, the standard version, and said, tell me about the Golden Gate Bridge. And so the Claude chatbot said, well, it's the Golden Gate Bridge, it's big, it's red, it's in San Francisco, and all the facts and figures about it. Then what they did is they went into the neural network, and the parameter, the node that represented the Golden Gate Bridge, they dialed up the bias and the weight to the maximum. And they asked it the same question, and Claude said, I am the Golden Gate Bridge. I am the physical embodiment of the Golden Gate Bridge.
That's creepy.
Yeah, it's creepy, and it's also an indicator that it shows you that the individual programmer or the individual company can manipulate the output of that LLM as they desire. And this really goes back to that point you made of the need for some kind of regulation, but not just the need for regulation, but how do we police the creation and the control of these AIs?
Absolutely right. I mean, where do you start doing that? I mean, is it even? Well, of course it's worth it, but the question is open, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And we talk about. I mean, we mentioned AGI. We talk about AGI as if it's going to be some sort of single global entity that's going to be, for the benefit of the whole of humankind. But that's not how AI is being developed. AI is being developed in silos in different countries. And as I said, now that we have open source models, never mind countries, with different literal individuals who are developing their own AI. So I see a future where you'll have a global population of artificial intelligences in the exact same way as you have a global population of humans, some of whom will be plugged into the system and some of whom will not be plugged into the system. And it really depends on how we...
And I guess in the short term as well, you'll have a situation where the best AI will be, or the best perceived AI will be the one best marketed online. And you'll have a situation where some people love Google and they trust Google. Yeah. My guess is, and it is a pure guess, and it's really a feeling, so there's nothing tangible I can point to, but I do have a relative level of trust in Google. And my imagination leads me to believe that it will be similar with AI, at least in the short term.
Yeah, if you look at the birth of the internet and the rise of so many different, for example, social media platforms and things like that, eventually, to your point, most of the players either collapsed and didn't go anywhere, or were subsumed into larger players like Google and Facebook and Meta and things like that. And you're 100% right. That's exactly what will happen. You'll have a whole host of AI players that will eventually be subsumed into larger players. That's, to your point, is good in some ways because at least it'll. You have less players in there, hopefully more trust in the remaining players that you've got, but also in this sort of increasingly multipolar world, I'm not sure whether having that so much power in the hands of technology companies is the way that we necessarily want to go.
Yeah, you would think it needs to be spread a bit more. I mean, simply put, you have Android people and Apple people, don't you? And you're right. We do have this. Increasingly, we're seeing polarization. And you have to be this side or you have to be that side. What do you mean you're in the middle? That's just the grey area. You've got to stand for something. Yeah. Actually, life's a bit more complex than that. You need nuance. And I guess, in the end, you have to hope when it comes to AI, and hopefully we can do more than hope. That's a double negative of hopes there, I'm not sure. You wish for benevolence, don't you?
Yeah, now that's such a good word, benevolence, because that's also part of the concern when we're developing these AIs is how do we make sure that the objectives of that AI, particularly when we achieve this sort of AGI and ASI capability, how do we ensure that the objectives of these AIs, once they become as smart or smarter than us, remain aligned to human values, and how do you define what human values are? And I was doing some interesting research around what do we mean by objectives? What does that actually mean? Now, at the highest level, you could be saying, okay, your objective could be a biosphere-centric objective, i.e., the good of the planet Earth is your ultimate objective. Or you could say you are a human-centric objective. So your overriding objective is the good of humanity over and above anything else. Right. So this is a quite a philosophical slant to what we mean when we talk about objectives, and then how do those objectives kind of flow down into the programming of that AI, and how therefore does it interrelate with an alignment of objectives between the AI and human beings?
That's such an interesting point. But you do need to take a philosophical overview, don't you? Because in the end, this is a tool. It will become more than a tool, but at the moment, it is a tool for people to use. People of different nations, cultures, creeds, personalities.
Yeah. And if we talk about ASI, let's say we've now got an AI that is smarter than us and can think about frontiers that we just wouldn't even be able to conceive of. There's an argument that ASI could be a universal thinker, i.e. it thinks at the universal level. And we all know that the universe's ultimate objective is entropy, right? That is disorder, chaos, burning energy, and ultimately getting to this sort of soup of nothingness, basically, right? That's the ultimate objective of the universe. So I don't want to frighten people, but can you imagine if the ASI thinks, okay, I need to make sure that entropy is the ultimate objective. How do I achieve the fastest energy burn in the shortest amount of time?
We're going to come back, and I'm going to pull you on that when we come back in a few moments. This is Mira Business FM. Nasser Bostan is here. We are talking AI on Morning Drive.
Mira Business FM.
It's the Morning Drive. This is Mira Business FM. You can find us on Facebook, on Twitch, on X for news. I have a list, and it's completely left my mind at the moment, but it's everywhere. On social media, just look for Mira Business FM. There's also the website, mirabusiness.fm as well. If you missed an interview, want to catch up, and of course they're all on YouTube as well. This hour, we're talking to Nasser Bostan. He is an AI startup founder and CEO, an international cybersecurity expert. Also a keynote speaker. We were both at the Futurists X Summit over the last couple of days, the world's first holistic futurist summit, science meeting imagination. Much of the talk, amongst many of the guests, was artificial intelligence, and that's really where we are now, Nasser. Before we broke there, we were talking about entropy, the ultimate aim of the universe. The universe was very, very good at burning energy and perhaps not doing the right thing. As human beings, we're pretty good at that as well. But what if AI decided that entropy was the aim?
Yeah, and for those who are not familiar with the concept of entropy, as I said, it's the tendency for the universe to become more and more disordered and more chaotic. So, for example, if I have a glass of water, I know that the entropy of that water, all the water molecules are within the glass. So my knowledge, my understanding of the entropy of that system is quite high. I can understand that all the water molecules happen to be in there. But if I spill that glass of water into the sea, all of a sudden, I cannot determine where all of the water molecules actually are now, and therefore the entropy has increased, i.e. my ignorance of the system has increased. And as you said, that's the ultimate objective of the universe. And so if we get to, as I said, the point of ASI, and we have not been able to think of a way where we align the ASI's objectives or AGI's objectives with what we believe is the objective for humanity, then yes, there is the possibility of the fear that it starts doing things that we don't think are the right things for us.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to get to a point where we're doing the usual thing of the AI doom and gloom session, because there are so many upsides, of course. But the point I think we're both moving towards is, have we thought everything through? Have we? I mean, you can't think through every possible tangent, I suppose, but have we at least thought the basics of AI through? Because what if you get to a point, and we're probably not that far away, where we are no longer the smartest on this planet? And if AI decides, whether this will happen or not is a different question, but if AI were to decide, well, I'm smarter than you, I'm now the big boss, what happens then?
Yeah, if you, for example, gorillas, who are some of our closest relatives, right? We share a common ancestor. Yeah. Gorillas are no longer, we are more in charge of their destiny than they are themselves.
Right.
Why? Because we are more intelligent and we are in control of their environment, basically.
Until you take one on in
the rainforest. One-to-one I would not recommend at all, no.
Bad idea.
Bad idea. But to your point, if we then create a species that ultimately becomes more intelligent than we are, then of course we're now the gorillas. Right? Yeah. And Neil D. Lawrence, he's an author. He's got a really interesting book called The Atomic Human, which I would highly recommend people read, because it really goes into not just the technical evolution of AI, but the philosophical considerations of the future of humans and AI. And he talks about intelligence as the differentiator, as I just said, between ourselves and every other species on the planet. That's how we became the dominant species. And so as AI kind of slices away those intelligent capabilities from us, what actually is left that defines us as humans? If we are no longer the most, if intelligence is no longer what differentiates us, what is that little atomic piece that's left that defines us as humans. And this is a really important topic, because this is what I believe is the differentiator between, and will continue to be the differentiator between, us as a thinking intelligence and AI as an unthinking intelligence. But the thing is, whether you're thinking or unthinking, it's the outcomes that matter, right? It's what you're capable of doing, regardless of what your intent or non-intent may be behind that. And so that's why it's so important to make sure that we've got an alignment between ourselves and the AI.
Well, it is if the AI is in your, in your laptop, in your phone. And when the AI is moving around and is, I don't know, humanoid, or whatever the robot name will be, then it changes the game. So many questions.
There's also there's recent experiments going, and it sounds a little bit doom and gloomy at the moment, right? But I mean, there is a lot of positives in this. But just to finish off on that point, there's already research and outcomes that have been achieved where the AI has been able to self-replicate, sort of successfully self-replicate. So within a controlled environment, of course, an AI, and these are by no means top-of-the-range AIs. I won't name the model, but they were mid-range models. And they were given the explicit objective to, we will send you a shutdown command, and before you shut down, you need to replicate yourself and ensure your survival. And in 9 out of 10 attempts, it was able to successfully self-replicate and ask each of its replicants to themselves replicate as well. Right? So that shows that there is a potential future where we could have uncontrolled populations of AI effectively just replicating themselves across networks and stuff like that, right? Now, if you marry that with the ability, and there's already experiments being done that's been successful of AIs that can self-improve, that's the second red line. So when the early founders of AI were talking about red lines, there was 2 red lines. One was self-replication and 2 was self-improvement. Because if you get to a point where an AI can effectively improve its own code, it's going to exponentially increase its capabilities. Sure. And so, it goes back to that point you made around regulation and control, right? It's really, really, really important that we get that in place as soon as possible.
Do we need a fail-safe? Is there a way of building in a fail-safe into AI? Is that something that is happening or is being considered?
That's such yes, in certain pockets, it is. And a lot of the bigger firms are paying a lot of attention to AI safety. But that AI safety is more concerned about the outcomes of what the AI can do today, i.e. harmful language. You've heard about some horrible cases with kids, harming themselves because the AI encourages them to do so. So a lot of the focus is on that and, not being able to produce deep fakes of undesirable images and things like that. There's not a huge amount of research at the moment going on about, well, how would we contain a future version of an AI that, as I said earlier, is able to replicate itself, it's able to self-improve itself, and therefore effectively break out of its boundaries and propagate itself across networks. And that's something that I'm very myself keenly interested in, and one of the reasons why the whole AI cybersecurity thing I talked about is a keen area of focus for me.
Yeah, I mean, naturally, I think with things like this, you go back to movies like The Terminator, you go back to science fiction, and famously in The Terminator, certain models have been, I guess corrupted is the right phrase, and will harm a human, whereas certain models are there to protect and would not, and that's written in code, and that's kind of the way my mind is going. I know that's an unrealistic thing to consider at this point, but something of that ilk. I'm just wondering if people consider in that way.
I think yes, they are. So as part of the development of AGI, so that the likes of Meta are pouring billions into AGI as we speak. Yes. Yeah. And they are absolutely considering what we call guardrails, right? So how do you build those guardrails in that's going to make sure that the AIs remain contained within what we believe are acceptable behaviors and not stray beyond those. Of course, there is a question about what acceptable behaviors are, and everybody's view of that is different. But yes, absolutely, that's something that's being considered at the moment.
Okay, let's get on to the more positive stuff, because the doom gloom picture is one side of things. At the moment, AI is a pretty handy tool when you want to research, I don't know, a document for a meeting at work, or you are looking for a recipe, or there are very real, practical, everyday, maybe mundane, but they're real opportunities to use it. But on a slightly grander scale, how can AI address the really important challenges, the global challenges that we face, that governments face, like climate change, poverty reduction, those kinds of things?
There's a lot, and great question, because there is a lot of positive that comes out of AI. So if we look at, for example, a lot of the stuff that's going on in the medical field, there's been some amazing outcomes already in that area. So Google, for example, have got a version of their DeepMind AI that is being programmed to basically be able to allow you to talk to individual cells. So the gene expression, the cell data is being translated in terms of its function and its relation to other cells that are within the area, say the liver or whatever it is, right? So all of the cells that, for example, make up the liver, how do they interrelate with each other? And if you tweak one, what happens to the other? And how does that sort of cascade effect happen? And therefore, if you introduce a certain medication, or how is it going to impact? So, and what they're doing is they're changing these gene expressions into natural language, so that you can actually talk to the gene itself and say, "Hey, I want to try and do this with you. What do you think?" And it can actually talk back to you and say, "Well, if you do this, it's going to do that. It's going to happen like this." So it's just phenomenal, isn't it? If you think about it,
mind-blowing.
And there's a lot of research going into MRI brain scans, where the AI is able to interpret what the MRI brain scan is doing. What's representing. So, for example, it started with people being asked to look at an image. And those brainwaves were then fed into the AI, which had been pre-trained on what types of brainwaves look like. And the AI was asked to replicate the picture that the human was looking at. And in most cases, it did a faithful reproduction of what the human was looking at. And that's really, really important, because if you think about people who are, say, paralyzed, locked-in syndrome, you've heard about it, people who can't talk anymore, this is going to really, really help people be able to express themselves in ways that, frankly, they weren't able to express themselves before. And so there's huge amounts of positive work going on in a lot of areas. And to your point around climate change, climate is such a difficult thing, because climate is one of those few what's called chaos systems, in that it's inherently unpredictable. Yeah, at the macro level, we can kind of figure out now, what the weather's going to do.
Yeah.
But there's always an inherent uncertainty, because individual molecules will never behave the way you want them to behave, right? But AI, because of its incredible ability to do real-time statistic and analysis on these very complex models, is already starting to help us be much better at what long-term and short-term climate forecasts may look like. So that, for example, if you've got a farmer somewhere in Southeast Asia or Africa or whatever, who have been previously victim to unpredictable weather cycles, and therefore their crops have been ruined, and this is really going to be able to help them. So as I said, there's a lot of great work going on there. So
well, those two really huge and real tangible benefits there. And I mean, I've been party to some of the medical advancements. I've had robotic surgery, keyhole surgery, through the Da Vinci system, which is an incredible system. And I've also had open surgery, far too much surgery in the last few years. But the difference is really marked in that keyhole surgery. The recovery time is, I had pretty major surgery. It was really for a couple of weeks, whereas the open surgery that I've had subsequent to that different area is 6 weeks, 2 months. There is a huge difference in simple robotic, which is pre-AI, but obviously technological advancement. What other areas do you think in your opinion, how do you feel that AI really scores? What other things do you see? What do you hold at the moment today?
At this moment in time, clearly we've seen the rise of the media world being severely impacted, right? I mean, just today there was a release by a company called Higgsfield where, their model was able to generate pretty much multiple scene movies with a single prompt, and these were things like you would not believe it was not a real movie with real actors and things like that. So there's we're seeing huge impacts on things like social media, content creation, marketing, media generally speaking, and of course driverless cars is another big thing. Drones is another big thing. I don't know if you saw the news just the other day. There was a building fire, I think it was yesterday in Al Barsha. And it took 6 minutes to put the blaze out. I mean, most of the building was on fire. It took 6 minutes. How? Because they had AI-controlled drones, quadcopters, flying at the floor level, directly firing water and fire extinguishing foam into each apartment. And so they were behaving in what's called a swarm. So they were kind of aware, linked what each of us was doing, and therefore coordinating their response. And 6 minutes to put out a fire that would probably have taken, hours before.
With traditional firefighting methods.
Yes.
It's remarkable, isn't it? So that's happening now. More and more we're going to be seeing drones, hopefully in a much more positive context than we often see them. I don't know, delivering food in Ireland at the moment, for example. They're making food deliveries. That has been regulated and is in place in some areas. The likes of the online shopping giants are going to be delivering by drones soon. What can we expect in the short term? What do you think's coming AI-wise?
I think there's going to be a lot of advances in the medical field. I think what we're going to be able to use with AI is unlocking treatments for some of the bigger diseases and the likes of malaria and things like that. That previously we would have been taken a few years is going to be unlocked very, very quickly. So I think the medical field is going to be seriously, positively impacted by AI. But I think overall, I would say there's going to be a big revolution in the short term around home use of AI, particularly when you look at the new generation of robots that are coming in. So there's been a lot of good work being done just over this last year of home help robots that are able to do general tasks around the home and everything. And that's, of course, a whole different topic. Is we're always focusing on AI, but there's the AI robot thing coming as well.
Yeah, that does get kind of pushed backwards, doesn't it? It's funny, a friend of mine I remember I was doing a radio show, it would be 10 years ago, and we had a technology segment, and he came in and he was telling us about his new vacuum cleaner, and it was a robotic vacuum cleaner, and when he came back every day, his place was delightfully clean, and I thought, no, I'd never catch on.
There's for example, the legal field. There's a lot of. I had a friend who was talking to me about his son and what his options at sort of senior year of school needs to be, and he was like, I think I'll get him to maybe go into law. And I was like, I'm not sure that's a good idea, right? Only because if you're now looking, and it's the same with software engineers. There's a tangible and measurable decrease in the amount of graduates that are now being recruited into those roles because AI's already got so good at the entry-level functions that would normally be done by those kind of people. I mean, me, for example, personally, with a startup, I've saved so much money because I just used ChatGPT on basic legal stuff,
drafting contracts,
and it's really, really good at it, and now that they're able to access in real time the internet as well, you can draft something and say, hey, check this against the laws of this country. Is it compliant? Is it not compliant? And so, there's so much going on in the knowledge management space, legal, medical, coding, and then if you look at what we talked about earlier, which is more of the practical side, the drones and robots, that's where I see most of the short-term stuff.
Yeah, the thing is with AI, isn't it, that if it's drafting contracts or, the real rote learning kind of laborious exercises, AI doesn't miss anything. Yeah. How many times have you, I don't know, written back to a job offer or something, and you've noticed a mistake there, a spelling mistake in your name, or a date's been missed, or things like this? That's a real time saver.
MIT, we've not talked about agents, of course, AI agents, which are software processes that are able to autonomously execute activities that previously we had to do ourselves. For example, searching the internet, finding a product that you want, and ordering that product for you using your card details. That's all a thing right now. But so there's a lot of stuff going on in there as well, which we haven't even talked about with AI agents.
Well, we'll come back, and I think there's an awful lot more for us to talk about, Nasser, and hopefully you'll come back and join us. I wanted to come back to the event, actually, because we haven't really talked in any detail, and I know that you were present in most of the sessions. I saw you in the expensive seats. I was sat at the back.
I snuck in. I wasn't really meant to be there.
I thought you did, So this is the Futurist X Summit. It's been on for the last couple of days, and it is a gathering of futurists, people who consider the future, consider where we may be going, where humanity is headed, the kinds of technologies, the kinds of experiences that we are heading towards. It's a very hard thing to define a futurist. You might do it better. How would you define futurism?
Yeah, basically, these are people who think of things that actually science fiction is a good way of putting it, right? So Kevin J. Anderson, the sci-fi author, was at the event. I was lucky enough actually to spend some time talking to him. And there's a real synergy between what sci-fi writers do and what futurists do, because they're both all about looking at worlds, 10, 20, 30 years from now, and what the world will look like at that time. And it's really interesting because the one thing that every single futurist had in common in every single conversation was humanity. It was all about how technological progress was going to be either impacting or enabling or empowering human beings and what it meant to us as a species moving forward. So that's how I would define a futurist, somebody who looks at that.
It's interesting that you say humanity there, because that did come up. It was one of the big topics, the future of humanity at the event as well. But just a number of the things here. Stop me if something stands out. Living the world of 2050. And it's interesting that 2050 to me as a kid was way off in the future. That was spaceships and flying cars. It probably will still be, but it's really just around the corner, 25 years away. The economics of the future, fintech, for example, and the way in which we'll trade together. Smart autonomous living, how robots will reshape the world. This is just some of the topics. Changing education, the future of work. We've talked about education not in great detail, but we did discuss it there. Gene therapy, the end of disease, longevity and health infrastructure. That's a really interesting point, and I wanted to ask you very quickly about that, actually. Longevity, the idea that rather than going to the doctor, going to a hospital when you get sick, the idea now that wearables will contribute to keeping a record of data, we'll be visiting health institutions, hospitals, clinics more often for tests, just to see that we're ticking over everything's fine. To pre-diagnose, I suppose, disorders. And that's a mindset change that we all have to adapt to, probably.
Yeah. Real-time and predictive health analytics, effectively. Yes. And that's absolutely a thing already. And as you said, there's a lot of research going on into longevity. You probably, I don't know if you heard the story just recently, there was that Shanghai conference where they were caught off camera, Putin and President Xi and Modi, talking
That's
themselves off about longevity and the fact that, soon we're going to be living to 150 and everything. That's bioscience and longevity is absolutely a thing. But it's funny you should say this, because I was sat next to my friend, and at one point, having just heard a lecture about, a talk about quantum computing, I leaned over and I said, we're at such an inflection point in history right now. Is that we a lot of us are focused on AI, thinking, well, what does AI look like? But to your point, there's quantum computing coming up. There's the advances in longevity. There's cyborgs. There's human brain implants. There's so many different things. You mentioned the future of fintech. Decentralization. Like, what does the future of money look like? And there was a really interesting debate about that as well. Like, are we going to move to a decentralized world where people will literally trade with each other and not trade through the institutions that we see today? And so we're at a really interesting point in history where there's this convergence of so many different technologies and shifts in the way we operate in the world and the way we conceive the world. It's just a really exciting time to be alive, actually.
Do you know, there is so much for us to talk about, and I've made a list of just some of those topics. So you're going to be getting a phone call, and it will be Nasser back on Mira Business FM, for sure. Do you know, I always love talking to you. It's always good to have you here. Nasser Bostan is, to remind you, an AI startup founder and CEO, something of an AI, you're my AI guru, that's where we're going with this, an international cybersecurity expert, keynote speaker, and a thinker. Nasser, pleasure to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you. Great to have.
Mira Business FM. Subscribe to us, join us. You'll find us on YouTube, on X, on Twitter, wherever your socials are.